This podcast is part of the Big Heads Media Podcast Network. Go to bigheadsmedia.com for more great podcasts.
You're plugged in for the Podcast Wrestling Society, where you can get dynamic weekly pro wrestling and MMA-related content. Give us a follow on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at PODWRES Society so that you can stay in the know.
Faith is the place. The sky's the limit.
And if you like what you hear, give us a 5-star review and hit that subscribe button.
Woo! 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 Woo!
Now, your host, he is the one and only Troy Adams.
It's another Wrestling Wednesday on the Podcast Wrestling Society. We're going back in time to when men were big and sweaty, fights were large and gave full coverage, and promos were bonkers. I'm your loving leader, benevolent host, Midwest Monster, and the captain of the C Team, Troy Adams. And my guest co-host for the day, he is the Hawks Funk to my Jimmy Jack Funk this week. He is the beefiest of cakes. He is Ryan from Blazer Tag. What's up, man?
Hey, buddy. Thank you so much for having me, Troy. And for the record, I would rather be your Jimmy Mouth of the South Heart. Or actually, for that matter, really, maybe I'd be your Hogan brother. I'm going to be something here. But that's really where we're at. Thanks for having me on the show. All the new folks listening in here, first time I've been on here, too. Just so you know, follow me on the Twitter. You can get my at the Ryan Green. You can follow me other places. My podcast, if you love alcohol and kind of like pro basketball, Blazer Tag Podcast is a great place to listen to three guys drink too much and give really ridiculous hot takes. So that is me. That's where I live.
Well, I assume by the name Blazer Tag and talking about, you and I talked off air about this too, or messaged about it off air. You're mostly focused on the Portland Trail Blazers, is that correct?
That is correct. I am here in lovely Portland, Oregon. So I'd love to talk about my hometown basketball team, and I also love to drink local ales, and so that's what we do on Blazer Tag. We drink way too much, and we give opinions really under the influence of alcohol. So if you love people who are homers and slur words, that's all us. I do have a pro wrestling podcast that's in the process of coming out probably in the next 2 weeks. We'll start rolling on that. Got a lot of the prep work done. It's now mostly just a matter of ironing out the last little bits of formats, getting our hosting and all that set up. So we're mostly there. And that'll be, we do have some stuff set up. You can follow our Twitter that has like 3 posts so far, which is Mystery X Partner on Twitter. We are, that'll be the Mystery Partner Podcast. So that's also coming up soon.
Nice, sounds good. Is that also going to be on the Big Heads Media Network?
There's a rumor it may. That is not yet locked in. So.
All right. Well, for all of you that do want to follow him on, or follow the Blazer Tag Podcast, just go to bigheadsmedia.com. That's where we live now. And you can, for us, you go to sports. There's a drop-down menu, and you click on pro wrestling, and boom, we're right there on the top line. And for you guys, go to sports again, and I haven't checked, but I assume that there's a specific basketball tab there that's where you guys would live.
I believe so. We were brought on. They're trying to run a big push over the off season to bring as many basketball podcasts on before everything gets started as they can. Try and get every team represented, and the best way to represent Portland is with folks who really love their IPAs. So here we are.
Nice, sounds good. Well, hey, I live in Cincinnati, so I'm not a fan of it, but people around here really love their craft beers. So
oh yeah,
that's a local favorite here. I mean, there's a lot of Germans. So
oh yeah. We don't get nearly enough German-style lagers out in the Portland area. It's IPAs everywhere you go, but we love them. So
well, you got to take what you get, I guess.
Oh yeah.
But either way, the whole good. See, at the beginning, not to discredit the Funks, but Haas and Jimmy Jack weren't exactly the best gimmicks for Dory Funk Jr. and Terry Funk, and they were on the big event. That's why I made a reference to them there, and because my gimmick is that usually I go with really obscure or crappy references to start the show, whereas you tried going with something good here. Like that just can't fly.
Oh man, let me tell you something, brother. When it comes to making pro wrestling references, it's best to stick really obvious, because really all we do is make obvious references, top to bottom. So, I mean, that's how you become the best in the world, is you just take something someone else said and you make it your own.
Oh, well, of course. But, today, speaking of the best in the world, the biggest, the best, the baddest, whatever, today we're going to cover an event that you can actually watch on the WWE Network that a lot of people may have forgotten about, but it was a huge event. It wasn't just a huge event, it was the big event. And it was live. It was live from Toronto, Ontario, Canada, where my usual co-host, Greg, was just not too long ago for SummerSlam.
The crazy thing about that, I mean, when it kicked off, they kept doing this weird thing where it was definitely a voiceover, and Mean Gene was definitely not actually in a helicopter, but they did helicopter footage going around with a very clean Mean Gene overdub, and then really weird, harsh audio cutting to people screaming and cheering inside of the arena. And it kept doing that thing. And that, it was almost giving me headache how jarring it was. This is Mean Gene Okerlund, and let me tell you, it was just very clearly cut apart. The production value is definitely not something that holds up.
No, if I will say this, I thought it was cool for a classic whatever, but and if you're watching on TV like I was, it's fine. But if you had your headphones in, I could see where it could blow your eardrums out.
Oh yeah, and that was definitely that was a headphoner for me. I've watched. I kind of had to break this show into chunks. Watched a little at home. Watched a little while I ate my lunch yesterday. Watched a little bit anywhere I could get a couple minutes to watch a match. So.
Yeah, I've been there. Well, the big event took place August 28th, 1986, from Toronto, Ontario, Canada, in Exhibition Stadium. The recorded attendance, it just says 74,000 plus. So I don't know exactly how many people were there. It was a giant outdoor venue. For those of you that see this on BigHeadsMedia.com or whatever, you can see the album art. In the album art, the background is the venue, an aerial shot of it. It's huge. There are seas of people there.
Yeah, it was, and the stage setup in there was kind of wild too, because instead of having tiered seating going down, they had the ring on a riser. So I was kind of surprised at how little that affected everything during the night, because the ring was sitting on probably a 4-foot-high stage, and then the ring itself was its usual, whatever it is, 3-4 feet further off the ground. So we end up with this weird visual where all the people are just on ground level, kind of craning their heads up and looking around each other to see.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm hoping a lot of people could see. I don't know how much ticket prices were, but I assume they weren't dirt cheap, especially with Hulk Hogan and Paul Orndorff closing the show. That was the big thing at the time, was those two. And keep in mind, this was between WrestleMania 2 and 3.
Yeah, this was and there's a lot of lingering WrestleMania 2 bits and pieces in here, as well as just a bunch of things that are very oddly 1986 about it. As far as the characters, a lot of weird roll-up finishes, which apparently is something that never goes out of style.
Yeah, of course.
So it was a weird event on the overall. Not a lot of promo segments, just a couple, and they were all really in passing. It was mostly just match, at least on the edited home video version that they have up on the network.
Right. Yeah, this was not pay-per-view released at all. Like, there wasn't pay-per-view at the time. I think it was just closed circuit. But this was not for that. It was exclusively a Coliseum home video release. But, you know, so if you weren't there live, you had to wait, I think, 2 months before the cassette tape came out. And that kind of sucks. But this was basically SummerSlam before SummerSlam existed. Because it took place in August between WrestleManias.
That's probably the best way to look at it. Beyond that, it was a weird event. It was a fun event, though.
Right.
A lot of wrestling, a lot of short matches, which was interesting, too. And a lot of janky finishes, but I guess that's just pro wrestling, and it's very 80s in some of the way some of them were janky.
Yes, it was something to behold. It was an interesting watch, I'll say that. We'll definitely get into the matches here in a bit. The commentators for the event were Gorilla Monsoon, Ernie Ladd, and luscious Jimmy Valiant. So we got Monsoon, one of the greatest African-American wrestlers ever, and Ernie Ladd. I'm just kidding. I kid. Jimmy Valiant. See, when I heard Jimmy Valiant, I was thinking the other Valiant brother, that the Boogie Woogie Man. I can't think of which one that was now.
Yeah.
I have my other gimmick. I do have a Jax figure of him. Believe it or not, people won't believe me, but I'll have to tweet out a picture. I have a Jax figure of the Boogie Woogie Man.
Oh man, I remember the name the Boogie Woogie Man. I couldn't tell you I can't recall seeing a single match. I'm sure I did at some point, because I definitely watched everything in the 80s.
Oh man.
At one point, I just decided, let's really catch up, you know, and I binged. But speaking of Johnny Valiant, I'll save a couple comments, but he definitely crossed a couple lines that do not hold up well, especially during the King Tonga match. He definitely said a couple things that are very like it would have been like, get off of TV if this happened within the last 3 or 4 years, especially. There were some racial things said.
Yeah. By the way, I did misspeak. You were correct. It was Johnny Valiant on commentary. Jimmy Valiant is the Boogie Woogie Man. That's the one I was thinking of. So,
you know, I didn't even catch your misspeak, but I knew where you were going. So, that said, the commentary was good. Mean Gene made a couple fun appearances. We can probably cover those in show order. It was a weird show, but it was a fun show. I enjoyed it. You don't want to get into the matches? I've got a couple takes.
All right. Well, last couple things. I will say, think about this. Johnny Valiant was awful, in my opinion. I just didn't enjoy his commentary ever.
Oh, not at all.
I thought he was bad. But it was think about this. It was between 48 and 56 degrees in Toronto in an outdoor venue. The fans were all wearing coats in the crowd, and the wrestlers are all, of course, half naked.
Yep. That's about right.
That sucked.
It's and which does explain some of the shortness of a lot of the matches.
Yeah,
I mean,
I would think
how long can you go out there and do some of that? You know, and the ones that went longer were definitely a little bit more athletic, a little bit more run around and do things types of matches.
Right. Well, the opening match, we'll get into some of the opening, preliminary matches here before we take a break here, for promos from Big Heads Media Network. But the opening match was the Funks, Haas and Jimmy Jack with Jimmy Hart versus the Killer Bees, B. Brian Blair and Jumpin' Jim Brunzell. For those of you that don't know, Haas Funk, I don't know why Vince McMahon took Terry and Dory Jr. and said, we're changing your names.
Well, what's funny, actually, I think Terry Funk had a different other name because it's Haas is Dory Funk, but Jimmy Jack Funk, I don't think that was Terry. I think, if I'm not mistaken, that was, I actually went on the Wikipedia deep dive because I was like, I think that is, maybe it's not, but I think that's actually, I forget the guy's name. The promoter was more famous than he, but he was the son of a Southern promoter who also happened to wrestle. and being a part of the Funk family with fake Funk names was about as high as he went.
Huh. Yeah, because it looked like Terry Funk in a mask.
It was, there was definitely a mask. It was Farron Barr Jr.,
Yeah.
also known as, I think he was Art Barr's son, was the deal. Or
Okay.
he was Sandy Barr's son, Art Barr's brother.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, because looking at him, you'd think, oh, that's Terry Funk in a bandit mask, or at least that's what I thought.
That
But-
was my gut reaction, but then I kept looking at him and going, no, that's not Terry Funk. And then I kept thinking Dory was Terry Funk. And so finally I just had to pull up the Wikipedia pages and iron that out. So it was those guys. And then my
That's
most
hilarious.
confusing childhood memory of a team, the Killer Bees.
Yes.
Did you grow up watching a lot of 80s wrestling?
Not a whole lot. I watched a few, like, all right. I watched, like, later 80s, like Demolition, Hogan, Savage,
Oh, yeah.
that kind of stuff.
Well, the crazy thing to me about the Killer Bees is I've only seen 2 of their matches, and both of them had the same ending. And one of them is, like, lives in my mind forever because I thought it was the craziest thing ever upon a rewatch. I believe it was the first Survivor Series that they were in, where at one point they do the same thing that was the finish to this match, where they put on masks and then they trade places illegally to get a sneaky victory over the evil heels. But they're baby
Right.
faces who are cheating.
Yep. That's what I put in my notes here about that, because I said, they both got knocked to the floor. They go under the ring and pull out their masks and slip them on. And body-wise, they look similar. In the face,
But the hair
you can
is
tell.
sticking out of the guy's mask.
I know.
It is not hard to tell them apart in the masks.
I know.
They did fix that
not
by the
that
time Survivor Series rolled around, and they stole a victory, and I think it was the first Survivor Series for the Babyface teams. In the Team Babyface versus Team Heel giant Survivor Series elimination match.
Yeah, well, this one, the referee, let's see. I think the ref gets Jimmy Jack out of the ring, and the Bees switch behind the referee's back. Haas tags Jimmy Jack in, and Al Brunzell catches him with a small package, gets the win. And I said it was a good match, but the fact that the baby faces were used such underhanded tactics really confused the hell out of me.
Yeah, and that was the whole thing. And mind you, I've seen 2 of their matches, but both times they basically pulled the same thing, where a fresh man sneaks in and hits a roll-up for the win. Surprise! Yeah. He's not tired. He's got a really strong roll-up.
Yeah, it's so weird. I don't get it.
It's I'm just saying, if Jim Cornette was here, he'd be, spinning in his not-existent grave over this. It's kind of wild.
Yeah.
But that's the way these guys, that was kind of their thing. They were the likable cheaters.
Well, baby faces in WWE, or WWF as it were, I mean, they were very heelish at times. Like, I've said this on every podcast that I cover, from old school Hogan. Hulk Hogan was a heel. He was back scratching, eye raking, hitting people with chairs behind the referee's back. Just doing crazy stuff and the crowd was cheering him for it.
Yeah.
Okay.
That moveset stuff, a lot of the weird things I'm trying to think, but yeah, underhanded tactics by old school WWE babyfaces were oddly common.
It seems
weirdly common.
Well, this next match was the one you wanted to talk about, is King Tonga versus a Magnificent Morocco with Mr. Fuji. Pre-match notes here. King Tonga is a newcomer to the WWF at the time. He came from Carlos Colon's World Wrestling Council based in Puerto Rico. Tonga would make a name for himself, body slamming Big John Studd on an episode of Championship Wrestling, but Bobby Heenan refused to pay the $15,000 he offered to anybody who could do it. The commentators go back and forth between calling him King Tonga and Haku, because at the time he was trying to change his name to Haku.
And that's really where most of us know him, because he spent most of his career as Haku, whether it be as a head shrinker or an enforcer in brief stint with the NWO or just him being himself, the badass journeyman that he was, kind of playing that role of mid-tier, ring filler, sometimes a jobber, sometimes, there to help somebody get a nefarious win. Great career he's had.
I always remember him as Meng.
That too.
But the thing was, it's funny that he changed his name from King Tonga to Haku, and then he wins the King of the Ring, and now he's King Haku. So he gets the King moniker back.
Now that you mention it, I actually hadn't even thought of that.
It's kind of funny, and now he just goes by the name King Haku when he does indie appearances, or he pops up with his sons in New Japan or something.
Yeah, I think, and didn't he have like a 10-second Bullet Club run?
He did. Yeah, he came out when they turned on the Elite, I believe.
So, he's still at it, and he's great, and I love him. There's nothing to do but respect that guy. He's notoriously backstage one of the most legit tough guys in pro wrestling. Stone Cold Steve Austin still brings him up as one of the examples of like guys you don't F with in the locker room.
Yep.
So he's the man.
He's a badass, that's for sure.
And in this match, I have to criticize him for one thing, because there was a sleeper hold at one point where Don Morocco had him, and they did the old drop the arm 3 times spot, and his arm dropped all the way, all 3 times. And then they said, Gorilla Monsoon's like trying to cover for him. His arm didn't go all the way down. No, it touched the freaking mat.
Good Lord. Yeah, I missed that part. But
It was a little bit wild, a little annoying. Moreover, I mean, if we're going to go through my hot takes here on this thing, all I've got to say is Johnny Valiant. He definitely said, King Tonga, he slimmed down, definitely cut back on the rice bowls this week, or I think he had a few fewer rice bowls. And then when they were talking about Don Morocco a couple minutes later being buff, they were talking about the long drain muscles, and then he talked about, King Tonga, he's got those short drains. Like another rice joke. Like, oh God, what are you doing? What are you doing?
When I think Islanders, I don't think rice anyway. Like, why is that the racial reference he goes with?
Because it's the 80s, and there are only a few races. It's white people, black people, and all Asian people. Never mind that Islanders are very different than, never mind literally all the nuance that needs to come into a race conversation.
Yeah.
It's just, he's a heel commentator, so saying racist things gets him over.
Yeah.
But maybe a little not over enough, or too over. I don't even know.
Right. Well, towards the end of the match, Morocco is starting to feel cocky, and he takes his time as he heads to the top rope. Tonga gets to his feet and slams Morocco off the top. Starts his comeback with right hands and chops. Tonga now heads up top, comes off with a crossbody, and the referee makes a count. The bell rings, and the time limit has expired. Both of these two, I would say, were great athletes, put on a good show. However, the fans couldn't decide, it seemed, whether or not they wanted to cheer or boo Tonga. Like, did it seem that way to you?
Yeah, well, it's Don Morocco, if I'm not mistaken, spent most of his career as a babyface, and here he was with Mr. Fuji as the evil heel.
Yeah.
And I think the crowd still liked Don Morocco. I don't think the reactions to any of this had anything to do with Haku. It had everything to do with how people felt about Don Morocco, start to finish. Though I gotta say, Haku had a good run for a couple minutes where he got some fire behind him. The crowd did, get his back for a little bit there.
Yeah, he was great. You could tell he was going to be good later on, and he was. So, and he had it's funny that he's making those rice bowl comments, whatever, because when he was Meng in WCW, he was an Islander portraying a karate man that I don't know. His gimmick was confusing in WCW.
A lot of WCW gimmicks were confusing. To this day, I'm still not sure what exactly Hugh Morris was supposed to be. So,
you know what? I don't know. That's an interesting one to think about. This next one, if for those of you, by the way, that have not went back and listened, last week we did a review of WrestleMania 2. That could be a good companion piece for this because you'll see a lot of the same names popping up, and you can see how different the company is between WrestleMania in, I believe that was March, and then here in August for the big event. This next one is a glorified squash match. It's Ted Arcidi versus Tony Garea. Arcidi looked like Vince McMahon's wet dream.
Yeah, billed as the world's strongest man. Legitimate fact, I Googled up on him.
Wow.
He is the first human in history to bench press 700 pounds.
Wow, that's crazy. He was huge.
I once benched somewhere north of 200 pounds. Just, I mean, not to, toot my own horn or anything, but, I'm kind of a strong guy, too.
Hey, I lifted a box once, so there's that. I didn't come out of a box, so I'm not over, but,
Well, Arcidi, he's got that arm strength, and that's why in just a couple short minutes, Tony Garea found himself out cold due to a bear hug.
Yep. Garea he's a former tag champion, too, with Rick Martel. But after Martel left the company, he went into full jobber status.
I could see. I mean, what was there for him to do? He was a fine worker, but there wasn't a whole lot of personality there for Tony Garea. There's nothing I remember about him, even though I've probably seen him fight in 10 or 12 matches. He kind of was jobber to the stars.
Oh, yeah. He was one of them, consistent jobbers every week that the WWF used to like to utilize.
So,
nothing wrong with it. But in the closing moments, Garea hit the ropes, staggered the big man with a shoulder block, and then a running drop kick, and then Arcidi gets back up to his feet, and like you said, he hit the ropes, came back one more time, got caught in a bear hug. That was it. He gives up. Match over.
Kind of ridiculous. That I cannot remember any other matches actually finishing with a bear hug. I remember there were a lot of like Hulk Hogan, Andre the Giant, and I think even Hulk Hogan Earthquake matches where there'd be really long bear hug spots. But I don't think I've ever seen a bear hug actually work as a finisher.
I've seen it just a couple times, but if anybody could get that over, it would be a guy that looked like Arcidi. I'll say that.
I will say the one thing that I did appreciate about this pay-per-view is there's a handful of things that are used as finishers that I feel like ought to have been used as finishers, right? Like a bear hug every once in a while should actually work. A sleeper should theoretically actually put someone to sleep every once in a while.
Yep.
Just call me crazy, but I feel like that actually would allow for better and more balanced booking. That literally any move could finish you, and that's what kind of allows for signature moves to really be effective signature moves and unique.
Yep, I think the same thing. It doesn't always have to be, 630 splash that, you can't do every night because it's going to murder your back in the end.
Well, you got to do what you got to do to get a job, and it's a wild world. So right here, the show kind of breaks. There's a Jimmy Hart promo that is not very good, interviewed by Mean. I literally, the only note I took on that was, meh.
Well, yeah, he talks about how on, at the Slammy Awards, Junkyard Dog, ripped off Jimmy Hart's pants and embarrassed him, and now his boy, Adrian Adonis, is going to get revenge for him, and Adrian grabs him, and they rush to the ring. And this match, dude, it was a battle of who was more out of shape. Adorable Adrian Adonis with Jimmy Hart versus Junkyard Dog, or as Uncle Dave Meltzer likes to refer to him as, the Junk Food Dog.
Ugh.
Yeah. Doesn't age well, but if you go back in the old newsletters from when he was alive, he always called him the Junk Food Dog because at one point he was built like a Greek god, and then he discovered vending machines, I guess, according to Jim Cornette. But in the end, this match was something. Adrian Adonis heads to the top. Jimmy Hart jumps on Junkyard Dog's back and gets thrown aside. JYD crotches Adonis on the top rope, and he falls to the floor. They slug it out a little bit before they get back inside the ring. Then Jimmy Hart gets up on the apron. Adonis charges at JYD, misses and hits Jimmy Hart, goes back to the floor, and then they call for the bell. JYD wins via countout. He somehow got the countout victory, even though Adonis got back in the ring and then went back out.
The victory was really peculiar because it was like a countout from being thrown out of the ring, because the bell rang almost as soon as his feet touched the floor.
Yeah, it was.
I actually
confusing.
was thinking they were going to do the old WCW, it's illegal to throw a guy over the top rope thing.
Yeah.
I wasn't really sure.
This was really weird. It was somewhat entertaining in a way, but it was sloppy as hell.
Yeah, everything about that match was like weird cliches. Adrian Adonis was billed as over 300 pounds, and it was definitely the fattest I've ever seen him in anything I've seen him do. For some reason, the Junkyard Dog fought with a chain for the first 2 minutes of the match, but it wasn't an ODQ match.
Yeah, there was a lot confusing about this card in certain matches, and that was one of them.
Jimmy Hart sprayed him with something only called That Horrible Stuff. At one point, that was weird. The other thing that actually kind of caught me off guard, but was the highlight, was Adrian Adonis. He was a pretty agile dude. He did a lot of what would be considered 80s era high spots. He was off the middle rope a couple times. He was around.
Yeah, he was good. Especially for his size. He the funny thing is, if you go back and listen to the WrestleMania 2 review, he took on Uncle Elmer in a battle of the hillbilly country boy taking on the. I'm just gonna say, that he wasn't gay, but he played like he could be gay, kind of.
The ambiguous flamboyant guy.
Yeah, and because it's the 80s, you got to put in the big old hillbilly that's disgusted by even the thought of him, and that was just the whole story of the match.
Yeah, and
so,
I gotta say, that gimmick, I feel like that one could be used today even still. Like, I think there's a version of that for the women's division right now that's available to be functionally the female equivalent of an Adrian Adonis, a Gorgeous George, a Goldust. The trick is, like, so much in that era was the homophobic side of everything. Even the Goldust thing, I mean, I remember specifically during his feud with Jerry Lawler, Lawler called him a particular word that starts with F that I'm not going to repeat.
Yeah. And Farouk called him something that, it could be that word. It could have been ferret. I'll just say that. Like, the way he said it, he kind of mumbled the word, but you know what he meant.
Well, and I remember them beeping it out even on the, pay-per-view, pre-match highlights. It's just a thing that it was a deal. At the end of the day, I think there's a spot for something like that. The one that still gets me, and similar but very different, is I'm still wondering why they haven't pushed Sonya Deville and given her let her really be the open version of who she is. A friend of mine, she was featured in a magazine a while ago and called The Pride Fighter, and I heard that and I go, oh, give her that as a working nickname, give her a push, and I think she could actually be an icon for people that are generally very underrepresented in pro wrestling and even in a lot of other, sports media.
Well, I've seen people laugh about it online. They were like, you've got actual, gays on the roster, but the gay supporter for their gimmick is the straight Irish man in Finn Balor. Mm-hmm. So you remember that was his thing for a while, was everything was rainbow colored and, Balor Club for everyone. It's like, that's fine and all, but it's like, you have actual gay people on the roster that you're not pushing that way, but you push the straight Irish man as the fighter for homosexuality and whatever.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, the only problem with any of that is, actually there's a lot of problems with it, but the trick is Finn Balor deserves a push, and he's a hard guy to put an angle on without letting him actually do his shtick. And for some reason, Vince McMahon really hates letting people be themselves in this era.
it's funny that you. I don't know. I thought it was weird that it's like on one show he's wearing rainbow colors and Balor Club for everyone and fighter for gay rights and whatever, and then he turns around and he's the demon. Like, pick one gimmick.
Yeah, or at least have some reason for the change.
Yeah, it just the flip flopping just really. I was like, okay, it's not really character evolution because you're going right back to the demon. So I don't know, but I think that's a good stopping point for our break here. We're gonna take a quick break and let you know about some other great podcasts here on Big Heads Media Network. As we said earlier, go to bigheadsmedia.com. And there are some other great podcasts besides Blazer Tag and the Podcast Wrestling Society on there. And also go to NoPleaseDon'tPodcast.com. That's the network for my other pro wrestling show, Retro Wrestling Review. If you go to NoPleaseDon'tPodcast.com/RRR, there's all the archives up there. We've got 5 official episodes now. Go check it out. And we will be right back on the other side of this break.
While you may think that history is vaguely interesting, the truth is it's fun and metal AF.
Echoes of the past are still reverberating through our world today, and Body Count is here to show you how our shared history affects your life on the daily.
Whether you know it or not. So, are you past the point of higher education?
Feel like you didn't learn anything from your high school history teacher?
Or just didn't give a flying crap about it?
Are you tired of always missing out on the yellow history pie piece in Trivial Pursuit?
Are you the horror of all your friends' game nights?
Did you once proudly announce that Napoleon Bonaparte was a super short little nutsack?
When in reality, he was an average-sized nutsack.
Have you been thinking about living under a faulty dam?
Or perhaps an active volcano?
Well, we have good news. It's not too late for you or your homeowner's insurance.
Come on over and listen to Body Count, the podcast that explores death and disaster through the ages with only one rule.
Someone, or usually a lot of someones,
dies! Because history doesn't repeat itself, it rhymes.
A proud member of the MSE Podcast Network.
For all the latest NASCAR content, including driver interviews, race recaps, fantasy NASCAR, listener call-ins, and giveaways, tune in weekly to the Lap Traffic Podcast on iTunes or your favorite hosting site. On the web, thelaptrafficpodcast.com, and on Twitter, @LapTrafficPC. Don't get caught chasing the lucky dog. Tune in each and every week to the Lap Traffic Podcast.
I'm Kyle.
This is Steven.
Together we host a show called
Boar Meets World.
Tell them what we cover on Boy Meets World.
Boy Meets World.
But that's not all, is it?
No.
No, we cover life experiences. Ours. Oh, son of a. Alright, just check out the show, please. We really need it. Okay? We need a win. Just check us out. We talk about the show Boy Meets World. Each episode of our show, we run parallel for an episode of Boy Meets World where we will examine the show.
That's way too much.
What happens, our life, how it relates to it, experiences.
I can't believe you're still recording.
I am recording it. Check it out, guys. You'll get some hilarious stories from me and Steven from our childhood. You'll get a great... I lost it.
Hi, everybody. I'm RJ Metzger.
And I'm Rachel Metzger.
And we're the Skeptical Skeptics.
Each week we talk about all the crazy things in the world, ranging from the paranormal to Bigfoot to UFOs.
And we look at it from the perspective of the believer, the skeptic, and everything in between.
So come check us out on the MSC Podcast Network.
Or go to skepticalskeptics.com and follow us at SkepSkepPod on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.
All right, we're back, and I hope you go check out, besides those other podcasts there we mentioned, there's tons of other podcasts on BigHeadsMedia.com. Go check them out now. But diving right back into the big event. This next match. Biggest. Well, what was it? The biggest, the baddest? I can't even remember that whole tagline.
The biggest, the baddest, the best, the King Corbin of events.
Oh, God. Don't even bring that up.
It's unavoidable, and but we'll get there. And we're recording here. It's Tuesday morning. Did you finish Raw, by the way, before we get all the way back into this event? I haven't either. I'm about 2 hours in.
I was out of town, so I didn't get to watch it. But yeah, I'm gonna go back. Now I've got 3 days of wrestling to watch in a row.
It's the worst when you get a couple days behind and you still are like, I'm gonna catch up.
Yeah.
Because especially now with Monday Raw, Tuesday SmackDown, Wednesday NXT, I'm actually looking forward to Monday, then nothing.
Yeah.
And then, a whole lot on Wednesday and then Friday. Because let's not lie, Friday nights are busy nights. I'm probably not going to be live watching SmackDown. I'm probably going to DVR it and watch it first thing in the morning with, feed my son some breakfast, sit him on my lap, and make him deal with a couple hours of pro wrestling.
Well, Wednesdays are going to be, I'll say Thursday. I'm probably not going to, because I work Wednesdays usually, I'm not going to watch AEW or NXT live, but I will be watching either as soon as I get off of work or the next day, first thing in the morning. So,
yeah, we're a couple bad wrestling fans. I'm working on my master's degree, and my class is every Wednesday night. So it's like, yes, nothing live for me on that end. So also, I'm on the West Coast. Nothing's ever live except for pay-per-views. So
yep, I watch pay-per-views live. That's about it.
I have to shut down Twitter and all my social media from like 6 o'clock on Monday until I'm able to, finish Raw. And usually it takes a couple days to be caught up. So here we are. But hey, speaking of catching up and the pain, we've got to talk about the biggest athlete from Canada.
Oh,
that's right.
Mike Sharp?
Iron Mike Sharp, Canada's biggest athlete, he was billed as.
I will say this. I'll just go through my notes real quick because one of them is very, at the end. To close out the match, Sharp attempts a slam, but I forgot, it's Iron Mike Sharp versus Dirty Dick Slater.
The Rebel Dick Slater. So he wasn't dirty at this time.
I just love saying Dirty Dick.
What else can you say? Vince McMahon approved of that gimmick.
He's like, why can't he be Clean Dick Slater? God dang it, pal. To close out the match, Sharp attempts a slam. Slater gets out of it, and he connects with a Russian leg sweep. Slater climbs to the top turnbuckle, comes down with a big elbow. He floats over into a double leg pinning predicament and gets 1, 2, 3. I said, this was so forgettable, I honestly don't even remember watching this match.
Yeah, that's fair. It was a really non-starter of a match. Nothing interesting. The only thing I thought that was interesting was Iron Mike Sharp. The whole time, from start to finish, he was loudly shouting insults at Dick Slater. And
man, that's great.
He was like, "Come on, come get me. Where are you?" And then I'm going, I think he's a producer for the WWE now because that is kind of working its way into some of the matches. But he definitely did it way over the top. And I would actually kind of be in favor of, I think there's some guys that could pull that off surprisingly well during a match.
Yeah, I think that was his thing back then. And that's a big indie thing as well. Screaming during, just shouting stuff during your matches.
Yeah, there's a couple indie guys that kind of do that. I'm a big fan of, there's not a lot of good talkers on the indie scenes, though. I saw MJF 6 months ago, and when that guy talked, I was like, oh, this guy's going to be famous. And
yeah, he's got something.
And he's putting it together very fast. But yeah, forgettable match. Goes straight into Bobby Heenan doing a segment with Mean Gene. The first chunk.
Decent.
Go ahead, give me your take. Yeah.
Well, I just said Mean Gene Okerlund interviews Bobby the Brain Heenan about Bobby's upcoming contest against the Machines. For those of you that don't remember, it's a bunch of dudes in singlets with masks that match. He says that in the main event, his man Paul Orndorff is going to take away Hulk Hogan's WWF Championship. He doesn't talk a whole lot about his match that he's about to wrestle in.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about it, though, and this is just proof, even though this is non-commentary Bobby Heenan, it's manager Bobby Heenan, it's just proof that this man is a genius at riling up a crowd and at saying the right things, and his timing was phenomenal. Because during this interview, and it was a totally forgettable, totally lame interview that was crammed into a minute, he, at one point in the middle of it, he says, and all these idiots out here just keep shouting at me, calling me a weasel, and Mean Gene's like, I don't hear anything, and nobody'd heard anything up to that point. He brought up his own insult that people used to call him, and then the crowd started calling him weasel. Very similar to Owen Hart when he started selling the I'm not a nugget thing after Triple H had called him that years ago. They're selling their own thing to get heat and to get over as a mocked, hated, and ridiculed heel.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
Heenan is
really got the crowd
best at that.
up.
And then that match starts, and literally all through the match, and every time he does anything a little shady, Weasel chants get popping up and start happening. And he was very good at drawing his own heat. Bobby Heenan, even in this particular, not particularly interesting event, he's the guy who knew how to make himself get over with a crowd.
Yes, for sure. It was a hot, real quick interview, and like you said, all he had to do was mention Weasel, and I was like, man, that's old school. But it's
good.
Oh, go ahead.
No, it's good. That's all. I was just cheering up.
Yeah. The actual match at hand, though, was like two guys and their manager. So it was King Kong Bundy, Big John Studd, and Bobby the Brain Heenan. They took on the Machines of Super Machine and Big Machine and Captain Lou Albano, and they had the Giant Machine in their corner. It was funny that, for those of you that don't know, the Giant Machine is Andre the Giant.
Very obviously Andre the Giant.
Right.
And mind you, the other two Machines are pretty forgettable bit players from that era. So...
Well, what's funny that I was thinking about was, he's on the other side of the ring from Bobby Heenan here. In just a few months, he would join the Heenan family, and Bobby Heenan would lead him into the main event of WrestleMania 3 against Hulk Hogan.
Good old wrestling booking. You gotta turn heel sometime.
Yep, and now was finally the time for the Giant. But towards go ahead.
I was just going to say the other two guys under the mask, we may know them better as Demolition Axe or the Blacktop Bully. And the other guy was Blackjack Mulligan, member of the Blackjacks, father of a couple kind of famous guys, grandfather of a couple other famous guys, father-in-law of another famous guy. A lot of wrestlers in his lineage.
Was it Demolition Axe or Smash?
It was Axe when I Wikipedia'd it.
Okay, then Smash was the Blacktop Bully.
You're right, Smash was the Blacktop Bully.
Yeah.
Axe was, I forget who, was he the Bastion Booger? Yeah.
No.
No, he was not the Bastion. Was he the Repo Man? Or no, was that all
was
Smash?
Also Smash. Yep.
Man, I always remember liking Axe more, but Smash definitely had the better stupid bit part career after the fact.
Yep, Smash jumped around. He was like hole-in-one Barry Darso and all this other crap, whereas Axe was just Bill Eadie. He was the Masked Superstar, and then he was Axe, and then here he was one of the Machines. But towards the end, Lou Albano offers Heenan a free shot. Bobby slaps him, and Albano with a flurry of rights, sending Heenan into the corner and turning him upside down. Heenan goes to the eyes, then tags Studd, who pummels Albano and then knocks the Machines off the apron. Chaos breaks out as the Giant Machine is in the ring now, and he starts taking out everybody with headbutts and chops, causing a disqualification. After the bell, the Giant Machine gets a hold of Heenan, hammering him with a right hand and a big headbutt. The Machine's gimmick was fun, and so was the match, in my opinion. It didn't burn the house down, but it got the crowd into it, and I guess that's all that really matters.
Yeah, I would say this was probably the high point of sports entertainment on the show, other than maybe the Hulk Hogan bit. It was very sports entertaining. I don't know that it was for its time, it was a lot of the shtick that made wrestling fun.
Definitely. And I love who's under the mask, but we don't know that, it's them under the mask kind of deal, That was very old school. This next... go
hit it. No, go ahead.
This next match was Jake the Snake Roberts versus Ricky the Dragon Steamboat in a snake pit match, which just meant it was no disqualification. They claimed that the dragon and the snake, their actual animals, couldn't be there for the match because it's too dangerous. And then Johnny Valiant said that if the dragon's dragon was there and saw another female dragon in the crowd, those 70,000 plus people would have to go jump into Lake Erie. The Monsoon corrected him and said it was Lake Ontario. That whole thing, I was just like, why? Johnny Valiant was awful.
Yeah, he was bad. I will say, as far as the match itself went, it was actually a pretty fun match to watch. It was probably the high point we just went from the high point of wrestling itself. Now it's the high of sports entertainment. This is the better wrestling match.
I said it was my favorite match on the whole card.
That's it's hard to debate. The Hogan match was a lot of fun. The Machines match was a lot of fun. This one was just legitimately good. Jake did a couple things to Ricky on the edges of he was the only guy who used that platform outside of the ring as a weapon. And I loved that he did, and it was very Jake Roberts, even though it was young Jake Roberts. It was a good run.
Jake was always one of my favorites. He just debuted like 16 days before WrestleMania 2, so he's still fairly new at this point. Hadn't even been in the company for a year yet. Still fairly skinny. Looked like your uncle that drives his pickup truck up to the convenience store to get himself a pack of smokes, a tall boy, and some lotto scratchers.
I am amazed that Jake Roberts had so few to none appearances on like 80s TV shows as the random tough guy leading the gang of local tough guys, because that's who he looked like. Like the the heroes go into a bar and someone's gonna start a fight. It's Jake and his two lackey friends. Like that's what he looked like, and he should have done that all the way through his run on pro wrestling, because
that'd have been great.
He is both. He is that guy.
In the end, Jake hits a short arm clothesline, sets up for the DDT. But Ricky drives him into the turnbuckle. Jake stops any momentum with a right hand, followed by an inverted atomic drop and a gut buster, then makes an arrogant cover. Ricky counters, holding Jake down for the 3. So a bloody Ricky Steamboat gets the win.
Good match, a lot of fun. Also, the chair shots in that match. They were like in the 90s. They got really rough because it was like take it to the head like a man, but they at least did it flat, so it was a little more even. There was a lot of like hits to the corners and edges of the chairs that there's just not a lot of ways to gimmick that other than by trying to pull the punch, and it didn't look like they pulled those.
Nope. Yeah, this was. I would venture to say that Ricky got busted open hard way.
This was also, just slight moving over to the production, this was the match where it first became obvious. I don't know if it happened the whole show, but they kept using this over-the-shoulder commentary cam. Whereas normally you see when they cut to commentary, the faces of the commentators sitting at the table, it was over the shoulder of 2 of them looking down at the ring out of focus, and it was a completely pointless, worthless shot, and they just kept going back to it.
And it was the reason that they did that was because they were sitting up like on a balcony, like against the balcony, so you couldn't get the camera in front of them unless you used like a pedestal or something. But yeah, so it was kind of dumb.
There was no reason to do it. It was just that. It was like, just let their voices be and then let them have commentary segments in between where they turn around. It was awful, and literally it went the rest of the way through the pay-per-view. This is where I wrote it down, and then the rest of the way through the pay-per-view, there was no unseeing it. It might have happened earlier, but it was bad.
Yeah, it was. I think it was just to show how high up they were and how many people were there. That's the only thing I can think of. But yeah, it was weird.
So the next match,
very forgettable as well.
The only high point for me, Billy Jack Haynes. They very loudly said from Portland, Oregon about 8 times. So here I am in Portland, Oregon. Hey, it's a local guy. I forget that there are ever any pro wrestlers at all from out here.
Oh, yeah. The old stomping grounds of Roddy Piper, too, I might add.
Yeah, Piper spent a lot of time out here. And, I mean, even through his death, like he was doing local events, comedy nights and all that stuff. So Piper is still over here and probably will be over as Portland's favorite pro wrestler for a very long time. Billy Jack Haynes tried, even with his University of Oregon, with the word Oregon printed on his ass, themed tights.
Wow.
Also, this match ended in a backslide. That's all I think, is there anything else to say about this match?
I mean, Not really. I mean, yeah, it was a match. Two hosses, Billy Jack Haynes, Hercules Hernandez, two big, strong dudes beating each other up for a few minutes. Like you said, backslide into a 3 count, and Billy Jack wins. This match was kind of just there, not very impressive.
Yeah. So the next thing we had was the Rougeaus, a staple of 80s WWE, versus Brutus, the not yet barber Beefcake, and Greg the Hammer Valentine.
They were the dream team, and as we said, like Greg asked this question said this last week on the podcast for the WrestleMania 2 review. He said, I always wondered why they were the dream team. What made them the dream team?
I'm not going to lie. I loved both of them as a small kid. I have no idea why. Like, Greg Valentine, in hindsight, he had, like, an elbow. Like, that was his moveset, is I can hit a really fun elbow, and I can act like I'm going to hit a figure 4. Like, those are the two things that he would ever do. But for some reason, I really liked him. And then Brutus the Barber Beefcake was a cartoon character. And he was never very good, but for some reason, I loved the cartoon character. He was the, like, I'll do anything to get over of that era. He was the R-Truth of 1980s WWE.
Basically, yeah. I mean, he eventually cut the ass out of his tights, so there's that.
Yeah, Booty Man.
Well, the Rougeaus and Greg Valentine were all wearing the same dark red tights, so it was very confusing. I hate when they do that.
That's just lovely booking. The best is when, like, there's mismatched tights on each team, and inadvertently opposing people are matching. Well,
yes.
Yeah. Anyway, so the only thing I really liked about this match was that I saw Jacques Rougeau sell an atomic drop in a way I've never seen anybody else sell the atomic drop. He literally grabbed his butt as though, like, the knee had gone, internal, and he, instead of bouncing and whatever, he, like, collapsed onto the ground and squeezed his butt. It was hilarious to me.
That's great.
And it was just a 2-second moment, and I was like, wait, did they not have the atomic drop figured out by then? But later on, Hogan did one, and it was sold, just right by Orndorfer. So it was just a weird moment, and I laughed.
Well, this match ended. The ref doesn't realize that, one of the Rougeaus is covering the not legal man. He counts to 3, and the Rougeaus get the win. But I believe that's how it went. But this had some good crowd heat throughout it, actually. In my opinion, was the second best match on the entire card. I like the Rougeaus in the ring. However, I will say the referee was the absolute drizzling craps, and he damn near ruined everything. That referee sucked so bad.
Yeah, now that you mentioned he was in the way a time or two, is there something else I missed?
Just the way he counted. It's one of the old school, like, got to put my hand under your shoulder and then slap the mat, do it again, then slap the mat. And his count lasted like 10 seconds.
Yeah. Now that you mention it. Also, in the next match, and maybe we can just move right into that. Is there any other comments you got on here?
Oh, no. It was a good match. Definitely, if you're going to watch something, that's a match, in my opinion, worth watching. But this next one, it was oddly forgettable for who was in it.
Yeah, it's 2.5 minutes. I saw Harley Race versus Pedro Morales, and I thought it could be good. Wasn't. Harley Race did the headbutt outside, and it just looked dumb. It's a bad move for that. When the finish happened, Harley Race used the ropes to just tie it all up to sneakily get an extra advantage, which, by the way, 1980s crowd. Oh, am I allowed to cuss on this show? I don't think I've let anything fly yet.
We keep it PG-13, so, anything...
Got it. They did a BS chant, but they did not keep it PG-13.
Which is hilarious, because we mentioned last week the opening match of WrestleMania 2 got a BS chant just raining down. I was like, 1986? What the hell?
Yeah, apparently Canadians have very strong opinions.
Well, what was weird
I guess the other one was...
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, what was weird here was they let the NWA guy go over the WWF guy.
Oh, yeah.
which is not typical Vince McMahon, at least not in today's world.
Yeah, but he also did it in a nefarious way. Also, speaking of bad refereeing, going back a minute and a half in conversation, the referee actually hit a 4 count.
Oh my gosh, I
didn't notice until the replay. In the replay, like, he clearly comes down, his hands on the ground, and then he lifts up and does the 1, but he does 4. So I don't know if he just didn't count the first one for some reason or what, but he went all the way to 4. So
an idiot.
There we are. And finally, I guess, anything else on that one?
Well, I just said, yet another forgettable match, but this involved 2 bona fide legends, so it's really shocking.
Yeah, I mean, it was a fine match. If anything, I actually feel like I appreciate Paul Orndorfer a little bit more, just because Paul Orndorfer is a guy who I know I underrate in my historical rankings.
Mm-hmm.
And in this one, he put on a pretty good show.
Yeah. Well, this main event, it was for the WWF Championship. Hollywood Hogan. Gosh, I'm
the
10 years in the
immortal
future. Yes, it was the Incredible Hulk Hogan, WWF Champion, versus Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff with Bobby the Brain Heenan in his corner.
Mr.
Yes.
Wonderful, that says that on his shorts with the number 1 followed by Durful. So apparently he did not make the same mistake as famous That Thing You Do band The Wonders in calling himself Mr. O'Neederful.
Wow, you referenced one of my favorite, most obscure movies ever. Nice.
Hey, welcome to the internet. This is where we live.
Basically, I did notice. I did notice Paul Orndorff and Hulk Hogan came out to Real American.
Yes, I actually looked that up because I thought that was weird. Apparently, Orndorff said it was rightfully his theme song, and so that was part of the basis of the feud, was that Orndorfer was trying to get the rights to the theme song to be his, not Hogan's, and he was using it without permission, and it was part of the heat, I guess.
Well, for all of you out there who want the real story, we go more into it if you go back to our WrestleMania 1 review now in the archives. But that song, Real American, was actually made for the USA Express back in the day, which was the tag team of Barry Windham and Mike Rotunda. And then they left the company, and it became Hulk Hogan's. So there you go.
Yep. And now Paul Orndorfer claims he had a right to it for some reason.
Yep.
Mind you, it is to date one of the greatest pro wrestling theme songs ever. Only because it's one of the first, and because the lyrics are just so over the top for what it is.
Yeah, it's awesome.
And this match kind of had a lot of greatest hits in it. I mean, there was the Hulk up a couple different times. The first time he does one, though, someone in the crowd, or maybe it was a WWF employee, but a literal air horn goes off when he starts flexing and getting up.
That's awesome.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead with your notes. I was just gonna break it down here when you're done with your notes.
A couple other random things that I enjoyed in this match. Actually, just one more thing. There's a moment where Hogan is kind of celebrating after he knocks Paul Orndorfer down, and Paul had been celebrating previously, and he does Paul Orndorfer's strut.
Oh, yeah.
The crowd popped. I popped. It was like, oh, that's right. Hulk Hogan is a giant human ball of charisma. And that's why he became the most over man in pro wrestling for 15, 20 years, functionally.
Oh, yeah.
He
was great.
As much as it is easy to go back and, kind of crap on him in hindsight, let's not lie. I mean, he was the first pro wrestler who was my favorite pro wrestler. I grew up in this era, and he had me, and it was crap like that. He was cheesy, and he was fun, and he did it there in that match. He did a couple Hulk ups. Even after the finish, he did another Hulk up and a beatdown because he could.
Yep.
It's a good time.
Yep. Well, I just put towards the end of the match, the referee gets bumped when Orndorff accidentally runs into him, and keep that in mind for the finish here. Hogan signals that he's going to hit the pile driver. He gets Orndorff in the air, but Heenan comes in and clocks him with a chair. Mr. Wonderful crawls to the cover, and the referee's still down. He slowly crawls over, taps Orndorff on the shoulder, and rings the bell. Orndorff thinks he's won. He grabs the belt. He's celebrating as the bell rings. The referee tells Howard Finkel that even though he clearly accidentally ran into the referee, he disqualified him. So Hogan wins. And then after the bell, Orndorff has the title around his waist, putting the boots to Hogan, incensed that he didn't win. Hogan hulks up, goes to town on Mr. Wonderful with right hands and clotheslines and big boots, sending him out of the ring. And I said this was a very good match, but I didn't like the finish. I thought it was stupid. The Orndorff-Hogan feud didn't go much further past this, as Hogan would eventually move on to Andre by 1987.
Yeah, and Mr. Wonderful, solid as he was, I mean, he was not a Hogan League legend, nor was he really capable of getting all the way up there. He was not a Ric Flair. He was not, a force of personality to be, conquered. He was a really good wrestler with enough charisma to be great in his era.
Right. He did his thing. He was a great foil for Hogan for a while, but Hogan had to move on to bigger and better things, literally bigger, with Andre the Giant. It was funny that Orndorff was a stopgap between, King Kong Bundy and Andre the Giant.
Yeah, and I gotta think, if in an alternate world where he was a better wrestler, I think that spot might have been reserved for like a betrayal from, say, Mr. T or someone like that, where it felt more meaningful, because that's what they were reaching for in this feud, and I don't know that it ever actually hit that height or hit that level of meaning.
No, definitely not, unfortunately. But yeah, that was the big event. Any closing comments you got about it, man?
During the credits when they rolled, was the only time I noticed, right at the very end, it said, "A special thanks to Vincent McMahon."
Wow,
that was the only time McMahon's name showed up in the entire show. It was a very different era.
Yeah, he didn't do commentary. He wasn't seen on the show anywhere. It was a little weird. But, I guess can't be everywhere all the time. But I thought Vince was. But yeah, I don't know, man. I thought the show was decent for what it was.
And I would say that it was a show of its time. It definitely fits in the genre with the first 4 WrestleManias. WWE, WWF, whatever you want to call that era, they really figured out their production value more in like 1988, 1989. Like around the first Survivor Series is when they started putting together like, oh, this is how we do a show, and this is how we include promo segments, and these are where we cut, and this is, how we let, different types of people talk on a microphone.
They were still very much in the, New York territory mode, I feel. At least that's how it felt.
Yeah, this definitely feels a lot more like they were trying to present sport over sports entertainment. And the sports entertainment definitely became a lot more apparent when they started really, doing a lot of the things differently. They relied on shtick a lot more later on. They relied on gimmick a lot more later on. Here, there was just enough of that for it to, still pretend to have the hint of believability. Though I can't imagine anyone watching this and believing a second of anything happened.
And if anybody wants, further reference, I keep plugging this, but further reference of where the company was with quality back in 1986, please go. There was no contest between this and NWA as far as quality. Even though, I think WWF in business was doing better than the NWA at the time. But go back, listen to our WrestleMania 2 review last week. This was, I would say this was on par. WrestleMania 2 is not very good, but we made it entertaining.
Yeah, if we're talking like the peaks and valleys, WrestleMania 2 is it is one of the worst WrestleManias, if not the worst WrestleMania. Full stop.
It's up there.
WrestleMania 1 is legitimately not very good thanks to the things that came later.
It's boring, I'll say that.
But at least with WrestleMania 1, I mean, boring is a fact because it was the 80s, right?
Yeah.
The pace was slower. Try watching Family Ties someday when you're bored. You won't make it through a 30-minute episode. In fact, actually just watch the first 5 seasons of The Simpsons to the last 5. Watch a random episode out of any of them. More happens in the first 5 minutes of an episode of The Simpsons today than happened in an entire episode in 1991. Things have just gotten faster. Things have accelerated. Our attention spans have shrunk. We've figured out that people turn the channel less when there's more blinky lights, more rapid movement. And that's part of why, like, a guy like Ricochet, who, well, his mic skills still need a lot of work, because he can do all of the flippy things really, really fast, really in sequence, and really great, he's going to be a top guy, because when you're talking in-ring, almost nobody can do what he does. And nobody can just handle that level of work.
Yep.
So,
and not wrong, I'll say that. But yeah, man, this was fun. I don't usually review classic events with anybody else besides Greg. Every once in a while, my buddy Santiago will come on or whatever. But I'm glad to keep it all in the the Big Heads Media Network family and have you on the show.
Hey, anytime. Very, very glad to be here. I definitely enjoyed myself, Troy. Thanks once again for having me. Again, you can find me at the Ryan Green on Twitter. Most of what I tweet, though I have the basketball show, it's definitely a lot more pro wrestling takes than anything else. So, feel free, harass me there. Give me a follow, or for that matter, listen to the Blazer Tag podcast and hear me mumble and ramble and rant about, your Portland Trail Blazers, even if you're, in Chattanooga, Tennessee, or wherever else.
Well, that'll be fun. Definitely go check that out, especially with basketball season being right around the corner. Get ready for that. And go to bigheadsmedia.com and look for Blazer Tag. Look for Podcast Wrestling Society. And like I said, no, please don't, podcast.com/RRR. If you want a non-WWE retro wrestling review, we got some good stuff on there. Lucha, Japanese wrestling, American territory stuff. Anything not on the WWE network, we review on there. And again, thank you for being with me today. Next week, Greg will be back, and we are covering Bad Blood in Your House 1997, the very first ever Hell in a Cell, the debut of That's gotta be Kane. That's gotta be Kane. We'll see.
Among the best of Jim Ross calls. And there's a lot to choose from.
Oh no, that was Vinnie Mac there.
Wait, you're right, that was Vinnie Mac.
Yeah, no, Ross's call was when Sean went through the table. He's broken in half.
Well, when Foley did.
Oh no, he said it when Sean went through this.
Did he do it to Sean too?
Yeah, well, he didn't do the whole thing, but he said he just said he's been broken in half.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he did that with Foley too. Anyway,
he had a whole spiel for Foley that was better, but it was more memorable. But that was his call in between, when he could get in between breaths of Vince McMahon.
So when we're off air, I'm going to give you a classic WCW pay-per-view. I'm going to want you to go back and watch.
Okay.
It'll blow your mind, and we'll let you plug it, or maybe I'll do it with you. It is my favorite. I want to say it was 91 or 92. I'm going to double check what it was and find the card. I'll shoot you the message. But there is an old WCW pay-per-view that is the greatest pay-per-view of all time. Full stop. And it's late, I think it's 91. So it is very much of that era, and everything about it is beautiful and stupid.
Nice. All right. Well, looking forward to hearing about that. And I might tweet it out. And and of course, ladies and gentlemen, with October being right around the corner, we're doing the Bad Blood 1997 review. And then we're doing a whole lot of Halloween Havoc through the month. So check that out. We'll see you next week. Later.